The darkness of space tore apart like fabric as the massive human battleship pushed through reality itself. The UCS Defiance emerged from the swirling vortex of twisted light and energy with a sound that should not exist in the vacuum of space. That somehow did. Captain Jake Morrison gripped the metal railing of his command chair as the ship shuddered from the violent transition between dimensions. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations while alarms blared and warning lights painted everything in harsh red. "Jump complete, Captain," called out Lieutenant Carol Davis from the navigation station. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been awake for 36 hours, straight, preparing for humanity's first attempt at faster-than-light travel. The experimental drive had worked, but none of them knew if they would survive using it. All systems showing green across the board, Morrison released his grip and stood up slowly. Through the massive viewing window that dominated the front of the bridge, he could see stars arranged in patterns no human had ever witnessed before. They had traveled further from Earth than any person in history. 2,000 souls aboard the Defiance had just become the first humans to leave their home solar system. "Dr. Carter, what do the sensors show?" Morrison asked as he walked toward the science station. Lisa Carter was the best xenobiologist Earth had to offer, even though she had never studied actual alien life. Her job was to find it and figure out how to communicate with it when they did. "Long-range sensors are picking up something interesting," Captain Carter replied while studying the data streaming across her screens. "I'm detecting artificial structures around the fourth planet in this system. They're definitely not natural formations." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Morrison felt his heart rate increase as the reality of what Carter was saying hit him. They were not alone in the universe. Somewhere out there, other intelligent beings existed and built things. "Commander Rodriguez, bring us to yellow alert," Morrison ordered his tactical officer. Alex Rodriguez had served in Earth's Space Navy for 15 years before volunteering for this mission. His experience with ship weapons and defense systems made him invaluable for a journey into the unknown. "Yellow alert, aye, Captain," Rodriguez confirmed as he activated the ship's defensive protocols. Throughout the Defiance, crew members would be moving to their battle stations just in case. Morrison hoped they would not need to fight, but he was not taking any chances with his people's lives. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez called from his station near the back of the bridge. "Captain, the Oracle system is requesting permission to begin active scanning of the area. The AI wants to map everything it can detect." Morrison nodded his approval. Oracle was the ship's artificial intelligence designed to help process the massive amounts of data they would encounter in deep space. The AI had been programmed with every piece of scientific knowledge humanity possessed, but even Oracle could not prepare them for what they might find out here. "Oracle, you have permission to begin full-spectrum analysis," Morrison announced. A pleasant female voice responded from speakers throughout the bridge. "Thank you, Captain. Beginning comprehensive scan of local space. Estimated completion time is 4 hours and 37 minutes. Dr. Carter suddenly straightened up at her station with excitement clear on her face. "Captain, I'm picking up radio transmissions. They're artificial and coming from multiple sources." Throughout this system, Morrison moved quickly to stand behind Carter's chair. On her screen, he could see wave patterns that looked similar to human radio communications, but with subtle differences that marked them as alien in origin. "Can you decode any of it?" Morrison asked. "I'm running the signals through our universal translator program," Carter replied while typing commands into her console. "It might take some time since we've never encountered alien languages before, but the computer should be able to find patterns." Communications Officer Rebecca Walsh turned from her station with a worried expression. "Captain, I'm detecting what appears to be military communications protocols in some of these transmissions. The patterns match organized fleet movements." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. If aliens in this system had military forces and Earth's arrival had been detected, they could be walking into a dangerous situation. The Defiance was powerful, but it was only one ship against potentially dozens or hundreds of alien vessels. "How long until you can give me more detailed information on those fleet movements, Walsh?" Morrison asked. "Unknown, sir. The encryption is unlike anything we've seen, but Oracle is working on it. 2 hours passed with the bridge crew working frantically to understand what they had stumbled into. The artificial structures around the fourth planet were revealed to be massive space stations, capable of housing millions of beings. Energy readings suggested technology far more advanced than anything humanity possessed. Oracle's voice filled the bridge with new information. Captain, I have successfully decoded portions of the alien communications. However, the content is disturbing. Put it on speakers, Oracle, Morrison commanded. Strange alien voices filled the bridge, speaking in words that Oracle translated in real time. The destroyers have arrived, came through clearly, followed by Deathbringers approached the outer worlds, and then something that made everyone on the bridge freeze in terror. Hope is lost. The Terrans have returned. Dr. Carter stared at her screen in disbelief. Captain, that word Terrans. It's their name for humans. But how could they possibly know about us? Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him as he realized their situation had become far more complicated than a simple first contact scenario. These aliens not only knew about humanity, but seemed to fear them with a terror that suggested previous encounters. Oracle, how accurate is this translation? Morrison asked. Translation confidence is 87%, Captain. The linguistic patterns are consistent across multiple communication sources. These beings are experiencing significant distress. At our arrival, Lieutenant Commander Sam Brooks approached Morrison with a concerned expression. Brooks was the ship's diplomatic officer trained in first contact protocols, but nothing in his training had prepared him for aliens who already knew and feared humanity. Captain, what are your orders? Brooks asked quietly. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had come to the stars seeking knowledge and peaceful contact with other intelligent life. Instead, they had found beings who viewed humanity as something to be feared and fought against. We proceed with caution, Morrison finally answered. But we find out why they're afraid of us and what they know about humanity that we don't. Outside the viewing window, the stars continue to shine in their alien patterns while somewhere in the darkness, other ships prepared for war against an enemy they thought they recognized. The crew of the Defiance was about to learn that humanity's reputation among the stars was far darker than they could have imagined. 3 days had passed since the Defiance arrived in alien space, and Captain Morrison still could not sleep properly. The intercepted communications continued to pour in from across the star system with the same terrifying message repeated over and over. The humans had returned, and the galaxy should prepare for destruction. Morrison stood in his ready room staring out at the stars while trying to understand how beings they had never met could know so much about his species. Lieutenant Commander Sam Brooks knocked on the door and entered when Morrison called him in. Brooks carried a datapad filled with information gathered by the translation teams working around the clock to decode alien messages. His face showed the exhaustion that everyone aboard the ship was feeling as they tried to make sense of their situation. Captain, we've established the location of what appears to be the nearest alien government, Brooks reported while handing Morrison the datapad. It's a species that calls themselves the Zephyrians, and they have a diplomatic station about 6 hours away at sublight speed. Morrison studied the information on the pad. The Zephyrians seemed to be one of the more reasonable voices in the alien communications they had intercepted, while other species were calling for immediate military action. The Zephyrians appeared to be advocating for some kind of negotiated response to humanity's arrival. What do we know about their capabilities? Morrison asked. Dr. Carter's analysis suggests they're technologically advanced, but not as militaristic as some of the other species we've detected, Brooks replied. Their energy signatures indicate defensive rather than offensive weapon systems. Morrison made his decision quickly. They needed answers about why the aliens feared humanity, and the Zephyrians seemed like their best chance of getting those answers without starting a war. Prepare a diplomatic shuttle, Brooks. Take Dr. Carter and a small security team, but keep weapons powered down. We need to show them we're not the threat they think we are. 2 hours later, Brooks sat in the pilot seat of the diplomatic shuttle as it approached the Zephyrian station. Dr. Carter occupied the science station while running continuous scans of the alien structure ahead of them. The station was beautiful in a way that no human architecture could match, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to shift color as they moved closer. "They're hailing us," announced Sergeant Frank Collins from the communications station. Collins had volunteered for the security team despite having no diplomatic training because he wanted to be part of humanity's first contact with alien life. "Put them through," Brooks ordered while trying to keep his voice calm. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being unlike anything any human had ever seen. The Zephyrion had skin that shifted between blue and green colors, while its eyes were large and positioned on the sides of its elongated head. When it spoke, the universal translator converted its words into English. "Human vessel you will maintain your current position and prepare for inspection," the alien said in a voice that carried obvious fear despite trying to sound authoritative. "Any aggressive movement will result in defensive measures being taken against you." Brooks keyed the communication system and responded carefully. "This is Lieutenant Commander Sam Brooks of the Earth vessel Defiance. We come in peace-seeking dialogue and understanding between our peoples." The alien's color shifted to a deeper blue, and its large eyes seemed to focus directly on Brooks through the screen. "You claim to seek peace, yet your very presence brings terror to all who know your history. I am Elder Kethver of the Zephyrian Council, and I will speak with you only because our ancestors have taught us that even the most dangerous predators can sometimes be reasoned with." Dr. Carter leaned forward in her seat with excitement at finally making contact with an alien intelligence. "Elder Kethver, we are confused by your references to our history. This is humanity's first journey beyond our home system. We have no previous contact with your people or any other alien species." Kethver's skin color shifted again to what appeared to be a pattern indicating disbelief or confusion. "You claim ignorance of the Terran Wars. You say you know nothing of the worlds burned and the civilizations destroyed by your ancestors. This is either deception or your people have forgotten their own dark past." Brooks felt his heart sink as he realized their worst fears were being confirmed. Somehow, humans or beings that looked like humans had been in this part of the galaxy before and had left behind a reputation for destruction and violence. "Elder Kethver, we speak the truth when we say this is our first time traveling beyond our home system. Perhaps you could help us understand what our ancestors did." The alien elder was quiet for several minutes while colors continued to shift across his skin. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of ancient sadness. "Come aboard our station, but know that you will be heavily guarded and any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction. The records we will show you are sacred to all the surviving species of this galaxy." The shuttle docked with the Zephyrian station through an airlock that had clearly been modified to accommodate human-sized beings. Brooks wondered if that modification was recent or if it had been there for centuries waiting for humanity's return. Elder Kethver met them in the docking bay, accompanied by 6 heavily armed guards whose weapons remained visible but not directly threatening. "Follow me to the archive chamber," Kethver said while leading them through corridors that seemed to pulse with soft light. "What you are about to see has been preserved for over 3,000 of your years in the hope that someday the Terrans would return and face the truth of what they had done." The archive chamber was a vast room filled with holographic displays showing star maps and historical records. Kethver activated one of the displays, and suddenly the air filled with images that made the human visitors step backward in shock. The hologram showed human-looking beings in advanced spacecraft attacking alien worlds with weapons that turned entire planets into burning wastelands. "The Terran Empire appeared in our galaxy without warning," Kethver explained while the horrific images continued to play. "They conquered system after system, showing no mercy to any species that opposed them. Billions died under their advance and entire civilizations were wiped from existence." Dr. Carter stared at the images with scientific fascination mixed with horror. The beings in the recordings looked exactly like modern humans, but their technology and clothing suggested they came from a much more advanced civilization. "How do you know these were our ancestors?" she asked. Kethver manipulated the controls and the hologram zoomed in on the face of one of the Terran commanders. The resemblance to present-day humans was unmistakable down to the smallest facial features. DNA samples taken from battlefields confirmed that the Terrans were genetically identical to the humans who have now returned to our galaxy, Brooks felt. Sick as he watched more scenes of destruction play out in the holographic display. Cities burning under orbital bombardment. Refugee ships fleeing only to be destroyed by pursuing Terran vessels. Entire species making their last stands against an enemy that showed no interest in negotiation or mercy. What happened to them? Brooks asked quietly. Where did the Terran Empire go? They vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, Kethver replied while deactivating the terrible images. One day they were advancing toward the galactic core, and the next day all communication with their forces ended. We found their abandoned ships drifting in space, but no sign of what had caused them to disappear. Dr. Carter was taking readings with her scanner, trying to verify the authenticity of what they had seen. These records appear to be genuine and unaltered. The technology shown is far beyond what present-day humanity possesses. Kethver's skin shifted to a pale yellow color. And now you have returned with a single ship claiming to seek peace. Every species in this galaxy remembers the Terran Wars, and every government is preparing for the resumption of your campaign of conquest. Hope was lost the moment your vessel appeared, because we all know what humanity is capable of when it chooses violence over peace. Brooks looked at his companions, knowing that their mission had become infinitely more complex. They had come seeking new worlds and peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Instead, they had discovered that humanity's ancestors had been the galaxy's greatest nightmare, and that reputation would follow them wherever they went among the stars. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the massive coalition, Battleship Stellar Unity, watching dozens of holographic displays showing fleet positions across 3 star systems. Around her, representatives from 17 different alien species worked together at control stations in what would have been impossible just weeks ago. Ancient enemies had put aside thousands of years of conflict to face what they all agreed was the greatest threat their galaxy had ever known. The humans had returned, and this time they would be stopped before their campaign of destruction could begin again. Admiral, the Corvin Third Fleet has reached the rendezvous point, reported Captain Zeekmore, whose insectoid features made his expressions difficult for other species to read. They're requesting permission to begin forward reconnaissance of the human vessel's position. Vasquez studied the tactical display showing the positions of over 4,000 warships gathered from across known space. Each vessel represented years of technological development and military preparation by civilizations that had spent generations preparing for this moment. The return of the Terrans was the nightmare scenario that every military academy in the galaxy had trained their officers to face. Denied, Vasquez replied firmly while manipulating the display controls. We maintain our coordinated approach as planned, no individual actions that might alert the humans to our full strength. The Defiance appeared as a single red dot on the tactical screen surrounded by the green markers representing Allied forces. Intelligence reports suggested the human ship was alone, but Vasquez knew better than to underestimate Terran deception. Historical records showed that human commanders were masters of making their enemies believe they faced smaller forces than actually existed. Dr. Yolandra from the Celestial Federation approached Vasquez with a datapad containing the latest analysis of human capabilities. The tall, graceful being moved with the fluid motions typical of her species, while her silver skin reflected the light from the command center displays. Admiral, our scientists have completed their review of the energy signatures from the human vessel. The readings are consistent with technology described in the ancient records. Vasquez took the pad and reviewed the information quickly. The Defiance showed power levels that exceeded most coalition vessels, and its weapon signatures matched descriptions of Terran plasma cannons from the historical accounts. Most disturbing was the detection of what appeared to be some kind of reality manipulation drive that had allowed the humans to travel faster than light in ways that current galactic science could not explain. "What's the status of our special weapons deployment?" Vasquez asked while handing the pad back to Ylandra. "All vessels have been equipped with the anti-Terran countermeasures developed from battlefield analysis of the ancient wars," Ylandra replied. "Energy-dampening fields to disrupt their plasma weapons and quantum scramblers to interfere with their faster-than-light capabilities." Meanwhile, aboard the Defiance, Captain Morrison stood in his ready-room meeting with his senior officers to discuss their increasingly desperate situation. Long-range sensors had detected the massive fleet gathering at the edge of the star system, and Oracle's analysis suggested they had perhaps days before the aliens would be in position to attack. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Peterson spread tactical displays across the conference table showing the positions of enemy forces. "Captain, we're looking at overwhelming odds. Even with our technological advantages, we can't fight 4,000 ships at once." Dr. Carter sat quietly at the far end of the table reviewing data from her continuing analysis of the alien historical records. Her expression showed the concentration of someone trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "There's something wrong with the timeline in these records," she said, suddenly causing everyone to look at her. "What do you mean wrong?" Morrison asked while leaning forward in his chair. "The Terran Empire supposedly vanished 3,000 years ago, but some of these records show conflicting dates," Carter explained while pulling up holographic displays from her datapad. "Look at this battle report from the Andromedans. It's dated only 2,000 years ago, but it describes Terran forces using the same tactics as battles that supposedly happened 1,000 years earlier." Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kevin Shaw looked up from his own research into the psychological profiles of the Terran commanders described in the alien records. "That's not the only inconsistency I found. The medical data on Terran physiology shows genetic markers that don't match current human populations." Morrison felt a spark of hope for the first time since arriving in alien space. "Are you saying these records might not be describing our ancestors?" "I'm saying the evidence doesn't add up," Carter replied while manipulating her displays to show genetic comparison charts. "The beings described as Terrans have some human characteristics, but there are significant differences that suggest they might be a related species rather than direct ancestors." Security Chief Nicole Thompson had remained silent during most of the meeting, but now she spoke up with obvious frustration. "It doesn't matter if they were our ancestors or our cousins or complete strangers. The aliens think we're the same people who burned their worlds, and they're coming to destroy us." Chaplain Daniel Murphy nodded in agreement with Thompson's assessment. "The question isn't whether we're guilty of these ancient crimes. The question is how we convince them we're not the enemy they think we are." Navigation Officer Lieutenant Grace Williams suddenly straightened up at her station as new sensor data appeared on her displays. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the galactic core region. The signatures don't match any known technology." Morrison moved to look over Williams's shoulder at the sensor displays. Strange patterns of energy were emanating from the direction of the galaxy's center in pulses that seemed almost organic in nature. "Oracle, what's your analysis of these readings?" The ship's AI responded immediately. "Captain, the energy patterns show similarities to descriptions found in the oldest sections of the alien historical records. References to something called the Devourers appear in texts that predate the Terran Wars by several thousand years." Dr. Carter quickly accessed the historical archives that the Zephyrians had provided and began searching for references to this mysterious threat. What she found made her face pale with understanding. "Captain, according to these records, the Devourers were some kind of hive mind species that consumed entire worlds. The oldest texts suggest they were the reason many civilizations fled toward this part of the galaxy." Morrison felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Are you suggesting that the original Terrans weren't conquerors but refugees?" "It's possible," Carter replied while continuing to study the ancient records. "If something was driving them from their original territories, they might have been forced to take worlds from other species just to survive." The implications of this discovery hit everyone in the room at the same time. If the Terran Empire had been fighting for survival against an even greater threat, then their actions might have been desperate defensive measures rather than aggressive conquest. But that still didn't change the fact that they had apparently vanished without explanation, leaving behind only their reputation for destruction. Combat engineer Sergeant Frank Collins entered the ready room with urgent news from his monitoring of alien communications. Captain, the coalition forces are beginning their final approach. Admiral Vasquez has issued orders for all ships to prepare for immediate attack upon reaching optimal firing range. Morrison looked around the table at his officers, knowing that time was running out for any hope of peaceful resolution. How long? Until they reach us. 6 hours at current approach speed. Collins replied. Thompson stood up from her chair with determination clear on her face. Captain, I recommend we prepare for fighting retreat toward the edge of the system. We can't win against those odds, but we might be able to escape. No, Morrison said firmly while studying the tactical displays. If we run, they'll assume we're planning to return with reinforcements, just like their histories tell them the Terrans did. We need to find another way. Dr. Carter was still analyzing the energy readings from the galactic core when she noticed something that made her heart race with fear. Captain, these energy signatures are getting stronger. Whatever's causing them appears to be moving in this direction. Oracle's voice filled the ready room with confirmation of Carter's worst fears. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting multiple objects of unknown origin emerging from the galactic core region. Estimated arrival time at current system is 72 hours. Morrison realized that their situation had just become infinitely more complicated. Not only were they facing a massive alien fleet, intent on destroying them, but something else was approaching from the galaxy's center. Something that might be connected to the ancient threat that had driven the original Terrans to become the monsters that every species in the galaxy still feared. The crew of the Defiance was about to learn that their arrival had awakened more than just old memories of human violence. They had accidentally triggered the return of the very enemy that their ancestors had died trying to keep at bay. The massive coalition fleet moved through space like a storm of metal and energy as Admiral Vasquez watched the final preparations for humanity's destruction. 4,000 ships from 17 different species had never worked together before. But the threat of Terran return had unified them in ways that centuries of diplomacy could not achieve. Each vessel carried weapons specifically designed to counter human technology based on analysis of ancient battlefields where entire worlds had burned under Terran assault. Admiral, all ships report ready for final attack, announced Captain Zeke Moore. While his insectoid features showed satisfaction at the approaching moment of vengeance, the human vessel remains alone and shows no signs of attempting to escape. Vasquez studied the tactical display showing the Defiance as a single dot surrounded by thousands of allied ships. Intelligence suggested the humans were either supremely confident in their abilities or planning some kind of trap that would spring when the coalition forces came within range. Either possibility terrified her because historical records showed that Terran commanders never acted without deadly purpose. Begin final approach, but maintain formation integrity, Vasquez ordered while activating her personal communication channel to address the entire fleet. All ships, remember that we fight not just for ourselves, but for every species that fell before human aggression. Today we ensure the galaxy never again faces the terror of Terran conquest. Aboard the Defiance, Dr. Carter worked frantically in her laboratory surrounded by data streams from every sensor array the ship possessed. The energy readings from the galactic core had been growing stronger every hour, and her analysis was revealing details that filled her with dread. Lieutenant Grace Williams assisted her by monitoring the approaching coalition fleet while trying to track the mysterious objects emerging from the galaxy's center. Dr. Carter, these readings are unlike anything in our databases, Williams reported while studying the sensor displays. The objects from the galactic core appear to be converting matter as they move. Asteroids and space debris are being absorbed and transformed into more ships. Carter looked up from her research with horror clear on her face. That matches descriptions in the oldest alien texts about something called the Devourers. According to these records, they're a hive mind species that consumes entire worlds by converting all matter into extensions of themselves. The implications hit both women at the same time. If the Devourers were real and returning, then the galaxy faced a threat far worse than anything humanity had ever done. The ancient Terran wars might not have been conquest at all, but desperate attempts to fight against an enemy that could not be reasoned with, or defeated through conventional warfare. Captain Morrison stood on his bridge watching the approaching alien fleet while Oracle provided continuous updates on their formation and weapons status. His crew moved efficiently through their duties, but he could see the stress on every face as they prepared for what appeared to be humanity's final battle among the stars. Captain, incoming transmission from the Coalition flagship, announced communications. Officer Rebecca Walsh, Admiral Vasquez is requesting to speak with you directly. Morrison straightened his uniform and faced the main screen as the image of the alien admiral appeared. Vasquez was a member of a species he had never seen before, with gray skin and large eyes that showed intelligence and determination. When she spoke, her words were translated into English by the Universal Communication System. Captain Morrison, I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Galactic Defense Coalition, she announced in a voice that carried the authority of someone commanding thousands of ships. You will surrender your vessel immediately and submit to judgment for the crimes of your ancestors. Morrison stepped forward while choosing his words carefully. Admiral Vasquez, we have discovered evidence that suggests the ancient Terran wars were not acts of conquest but desperate attempts to fight against a greater threat. Something called the Devourers is returning from the galactic core, and your fleet may be the only force capable of stopping them. Vasquez's expression showed disbelief mixed with anger. You expect us to believe that human aggression was justified by some phantom enemy? The records of Terran atrocities are clear and undeniable. I'm not asking you to justify anything, Morrison replied while signaling Dr. Carter to transmit her research data to the Coalition fleet. I'm asking you to look at the evidence we've gathered about what's approaching from the galactic core right now. The transmission lasted several minutes as Carter's findings were uploaded to the Coalition's computers. Morrison watched Vasquez's face as her science officers analyzed the data and reported their conclusions. The Admiral's expression slowly changed from skepticism to concern as the reality of the approaching threat became clear. This data suggests massive objects are indeed moving toward our position from the galactic core, Vasquez admitted reluctantly. But it could be an elaborate deception designed to save your ship from destruction. Dr. Carter's voice came through Morrison's communication system as she provided additional analysis from her laboratory. Admiral, the energy signatures match descriptions found in your own historical records. References to the Devourers appear in texts from multiple species dating back thousands of years before the first. Terran contact Combat Engineer Sergeant Frank Collins ran onto the bridge with urgent news from his monitoring stations. Captain, the objects from the galactic core have accelerated. New estimate puts them in this system within 18 hours, not 72. Morrison felt his heart sink as he realized their time was running out faster than anyone had predicted. Admiral Vasquez, whatever you decide about humanity, we need to work together against this threat. The Devourers don't care about our conflicts, and they won't negotiate with anyone. The Coalition fleet continued its approach while Vasquez consulted with her command staff about Morrison's claims. Long-range sensors from multiple ships confirmed the presence of unknown objects moving toward their position, but the Admiral struggled with the decision to trust humans after centuries of preparing for their return as enemies. Chief Weapons Officer Commander Paul Jackson worked at his station preparing the Defiance's experimental weapon systems for combat. The ship carried technology derived from fragments of ancient human designs found in archaeological sites on Earth, but Jackson had never expected to use them against the kind of enemy described in the alien records. Captain, our weapons are powered and ready, but I have to ask what we're supposed to shoot at, Jackson reported while studying his tactical displays. These Devourer ships don't match any target profiles in our computer systems. Morrison was about to respond when Oracle's voice filled the bridge with an urgent announcement. Captain, detecting multiple hyperspace emergence signatures at the edge of the system. Unknown vessels are arriving in large numbers. The main screen shifted to show the edge of the star system where space itself was tearing open to reveal ships, unlike anything any species in the galaxy had ever built. The Devourer vessels were organic in appearance with surfaces that seemed to pulse and flow like living tissue. As they emerged from hyperspace, they immediately began scanning the system and moving toward the largest concentration of life and technology. "Admiral Vasquez, are you seeing this?" Morrison called out while watching the Nightmare fleet take formation. "All ships prepare for combat," Vasquez ordered, while her own tactical officers reported impossible readings from the new arrivals. "Whatever these things are, they're not responding to any communication attempts." The first Devourer ship fired a weapon that turned a small asteroid into a cloud of energy. That was then absorbed back into the attacking vessel. The demonstration was clear evidence that these beings could convert matter into extensions of themselves, just as the ancient records had described. Morrison made a decision that would determine the fate of both humanity and the Coalition fleet. "Admiral, I'm positioning my ship between your forces and the Devourers. Whatever crimes my ancestors committed, we can discuss after we survive this." The Defiance broke from its position and accelerated toward the approaching Nightmare fleet while Morrison's crew prepared for a battle that would test whether humanity deserved to survive among the stars. Behind them, the Coalition fleet watched in confusion as the humans they had come to destroy instead moved to protect them from an enemy far worse than anything they had imagined. The galaxy's greatest fear was about to become its only hope for survival as ancient enemies faced a threat that had driven civilizations to extinction for thousands of years. The real war was just beginning, and humanity would finally learn why their ancestors had earned such a terrible reputation among the stars. The Defiance raced through space toward the Nightmare fleet of Devourer ships while Captain Morrison watched his crew prepare for a battle that would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. Behind them, the massive Coalition fleet hesitated as Admiral Vasquez struggled with the decision to trust the humans she had spent her entire military career preparing to destroy. The organic enemy vessels moved with purpose that suggested intelligence far beyond anything the galaxy had encountered before. "Captain, the lead Devourer ship is targeting our position," announced Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Peterson from his tactical station. "Energy readings indicate weapons unlike anything in our databases." Morrison gripped his command chair as the first enemy weapon fired a beam of writhing darkness that seemed to consume light itself. The blast struck the Defiance's forward shields and began converting the energy into more of the strange matter that made up the Devourer ships. Morrison realized with horror that every attack against them only made them stronger. "All stop," Morrison ordered while his mind raced to find a strategy against an enemy that fed on conventional weapons. "Commander Jackson, prepare the experimental plasma array, but do not fire until I give the order." Dr. Carter's voice came through the communication system from her laboratory, where she was analyzing the enemy ships in real time. "Captain, these vessels are converting our shield energy into biomass that extends their hull structure. Traditional weapons will only help them grow larger and more powerful." The Coalition fleet watched in stunned silence as the single human ship faced the approaching Devourer vessels alone. Admiral Vasquez stood on her bridge, torn between her duty to destroy humanity and the growing realization that the galaxy faced a threat far worse than anything the Terrans had ever done. "Admiral, the human ship has stopped moving," reported Captain Zeekmore while studying his sensor displays. "They appear to be allowing the enemy vessels to approach their position." Vasquez made a decision that went against everything her military training had taught her. "All ships hold position and observe. If the humans are truly our enemies, they will join forces with these Devourers. If they fight against them, then we may have been wrong about their intentions." Aboard the Defiance Chief Weapons Officer Commander Paul Jackson worked frantically to reconfigure the ship's armament based on Dr. Carter's analysis of Devourer technology. The experimental weapon systems had been designed from fragments of ancient human technology found in archaeological sites, but Jackson had never imagined using them against an enemy that could absorb conventional energy attacks. Captain, I've modified our plasma cannons to emit a frequency that should disrupt the molecular conversion process, Jackson reported while his hands moved quickly across the weapon control systems. But I have no idea if it will actually work. Against these things, Morrison watched the approaching Devourer ships through the main viewing screen as they closed to weapons range. The enemy vessels pulsed with organic life while their surfaces rippled like living skin stretched over mechanical frameworks. Whatever intelligence controlled them was ancient and utterly alien to anything humanity had ever encountered. "Fire when ready, Jackson," Morrison ordered while his crew braced for the results of their desperate gamble. The modified plasma cannons fired beams of brilliant energy that struck the laid Devourer ship with devastating effect. Instead of absorbing, the enemy vessel convulsed as its conversion process was disrupted, and sections of its hull began to dissolve back into their component atoms. The ship twisted in space like a wounded animal before exploding in a flash of light that illuminated the entire star system. "Direct hit, Captain," Jackson announced with amazement clear in his voice. "The frequency disruption worked. We can actually hurt these things." The remaining Devourer ships responded to the destruction of their companion by accelerating toward the Defiance while emitting sounds that carried through space despite the vacuum. The alien screams were filled with rage and hunger as the hive mind realized it faced an enemy capable of true resistance. Admiral Vasquez watched the battle unfold with growing understanding of what the galaxy truly faced. "All ships move to support the human vessel," she ordered while abandoning decades of military doctrine. "Modify weapons to match the frequency signature the humans are using." The coalition fleet surged forward as 4,000 ships moved to join the single human vessel in battle against the ancient enemy. Vasquez activated the fleet communication system to address her forces as they prepared for combat unlike anything they had trained for. "All vessels, this is Admiral Vasquez," she announced while watching the tactical displays. "Show her ships taking formation around the Defiance. We fight today not against humans, but alongside them against an enemy that threatens every living world in our galaxy." The battle that followed would be remembered in the histories of every species as the moment when the galaxy united against extinction itself. Devourer ships emerged from hyperspace in waves, while the Allied fleet met them with weapons modified to disrupt their conversion abilities. Ships from 17 different species fought side by side while sharing tactical data and coordinating attacks against an enemy that had once driven their ancestors to the edge of destruction. Morrison found himself commanding not just his own vessel but coordinating the defensive efforts of the entire Allied force. The irony was not lost on him that humanity had become the galaxy's salvation after being feared as its greatest threat for thousands of years. "Captain receiving communication from Admiral Vasquez," announced Rebecca Walsh from her station. "She's requesting permission to transfer her command to the Defiance." Morrison nodded his approval as he watched more Devourer ships fall to the modified weapons that his crew had developed. "Granted. Tell her we're honored to have her aboard, Admiral." Vasquez materialized on the Defiance bridge through the emergency transporter system as her own flagship took critical damage from a Devourer conversion beam. She looked around at the human crew with eyes that held respect instead of the fear and hatred she had carried for so long. "Captain Morrison, I formally request that humanity take command of this battle," Vasquez announced while moving to stand beside Morrison's command chair. "Your people understand this enemy in ways that we never could." Morrison accepted the responsibility knowing that this moment would forever change humanity's relationship with the galaxy. "Admiral will fight this together as equals. The Devourers threaten all of us." The battle continued for hours as more enemy ships arrived from the galactic core while the Allied fleet held the line using tactics developed by human tactical officers who seemed to instinctively understand how to fight an enemy that fed on conventional warfare. Dr. Carter worked with alien scientists to improve the frequency weapons while Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kevin Shaw treated wounded crew members from multiple species aboard the Defiance. As the last wave of Devourer ships was destroyed, Morrison stood on his bridge, surrounded by representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. The Nightmare Fleet had been defeated, but everyone knew this was only the first battle in a war that might last for generations. Captain Long-Range Sensors show no additional enemy movement from the galactic core, reported Lieutenant Grace Williams from her navigation post. We may have stopped their advance for now. Morrison looked out at the stars through the main viewing screen while contemplating what they had accomplished and what lay ahead. Admiral Vasquez, what are your orders for the fleet? Vasquez smiled. As she realized the question marked a fundamental change in galactic politics. Captain, the Coalition fleet places itself under human command for the duration of this conflict. The galaxy needs leaders who understand how to fight the Devourer's chief navigator. Lieutenant Carol Davis approached Morrison with course calculations for the journey ahead. Captain, if we're going to stop this threat permanently, we'll need to take the fight to the galactic core where they originated. Morrison nodded while considering the magnitude of what they were proposing. Set course for the galactic core. Signal Earth that humanity is no longer coming home as explorers but as the galaxy's guardians against an ancient evil. The last transmission from the Defiance carried a message that would be received by humanity's homeworld months later. This is Captain Morrison reporting that first contact has been established with multiple alien civilizations. We have learned that our ancestors were not conquerors but defenders against a threat that has now returned. Humanity's true destiny lies not in exploring the galaxy but in protecting it from forces that would consume all life. Hope was lost the moment we entered the universe, but sometimes the things we fear most become exactly what we need to survive. The combined fleet turned toward the galactic core where ancient enemies waited in the darkness between stars. Humanity had finally found their place among the civilizations of the galaxy, not as the destroyers of worlds, but as the guardians who would ensure that no world would ever fall to the Devourers again.